Let me tell you about a story. Now when men are talk bound about their law enforcement, a right bunch of clowns, how they wear their badge like a plastic crown, how they're sticking to a story of which they are now bound. It's a rabbit hole they don't want you to go down, but over in Wisconsin, they're doubling down.
Hello everybody, this is Eric Jose on Making a Murderer on YouTube. I cover the Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey cases, but also as time passes I've been covering other cases such as the Staircase or OJ and many wrongful convictions of youth. I go over the documents, the photos, the videos, anything case related, so stay tuned because I have many more videos just like the one you're about to see. Hello everybody, how you doing? We're here today. Well, we're just going to be talking a little bit about the case, mainly for those who have only watched Making a Murderer and don't know about a lot of the things that have happened since its release. With the release of MAM2 coming up here on the 19th, which is Brendan's birthday, by the way, folks, just so you know. With that release coming up, you know, I just figured we'd talk about some of these things that are really the big issues right now that are getting, you know, where things are being filed in court by Zellner and things like that. So these are the issues that are pertinent at the time. So I don't know if any of you saw, and I'll leave you guys a link to it down below, but yesterday a video came out that was made to represent the timeline of basically Teresa's interaction at the salvage yard. So it basically shows where she pulls in there and, you know, starts taking pictures, and a guy comes out representing Steve doing what Steve said he did, where he walked out to her vehicle and gave her the money and whatever. And so all that, and then she pulls away, and then it just shows her theory, which obviously is Bobby right now, Bobby Dassey. Because of the stuff on the computer, which I'm going to get to in a minute, she believes that Bobby Dassey is the suspect here, and she has a camera and a person representing him as she's leaving. He leaves the house, gets into his Blazer, and he's somewhat close behind her. They end up over on the Cuss Road cul-de-sac and all that stuff. So the thing that it shows, it's kind of like, it's not. The people involved were not actors. I'll put it that way. They weren't actors. It probably needs a little retooling, but some of the things that I thought were interesting about it. Number one, we have the fact that the prosecution has claimed that it was a .22 bullet that killed Teresa, but it seems one of Zellner's experts, Skip Palahniuk, very, very well-respected forensic scientist over at a place called Microtrace, one of the leading places in being able to find and identify very, very tiny particles on things. It's basically their specialty. He really wants to look at the skull fragments because something he sees in the radial spectrography that was originally taken of them back in 2005, 6, whatever it was, he sees something there, and he wants to put those underneath his Microtrace microscopes. The reason why I think that is because Zellner's blood spatter expert, has determined that Teresa most likely died at the back of the RAV4. Okay? The reason why is because they believe she was down on the ground at the rear of the RAV4 with the cargo door open. It opens up sideways so that it goes parallel. Basically, it goes in line with the passenger side of the car. So it opens up, the latch and everything is on the driver's side. It opens out sideways, essentially. You know, it just opens out like this. And then basically the door is in line with the passenger side of the car when it's fully open, right? And they believe that, and because of the size of the spatter, they believe that somebody was hitting her with the hammer on the head. And that when they were bringing that hammer back like this, it was tossing spatter onto the interior of the cargo door, which was open, like I said, and it was parallel with the passenger side of the car. So number one, they represented that, where they showed somebody coming out with the hammer and making that motion or whatever that would have caused that spatter. Here's the other thing that's interesting about it. And whether you put a lot of stock in the video yesterday, The one thing is that you can't deny is that Teresa had to have been put in that cargo area after she was hit on the head, or after she was bleeding from the head, in whichever way that was. But she was bleeding and she was put into that cargo area. Why would Stephen, if this happened at Avery Salvage, just, I mean, logically think about it. You have no crime scene there, no evidence, no blood, hair, anything, not even nothing to suggest that Teresa was even there, except for the bullet that was found 5 months later. But we'll get to that later. So you find nothing there. So you have no crime scene. And then you find that her blood is in the back, in the cargo area, like somebody had knocked her out and her head was bleeding. And then they put her in the back of the cargo area and drove that car wherever they drove it. Okay, why would Stephen have needed to do that? Okay, was he taking her on a joyride around the Avery salvage yard, hoping some customers and maybe his family would see that he had a girl bleeding from the head in the back of a strange car that they'd never seen him with before? I mean, right? It makes no sense that Stephen would have been putting her in the cargo area, but it's clear that she was put in the cargo area. So that's another little thing that I think is very, very important, that I think some people just overlook way too easily, right? Because there's just no reason for Stephen. If it was him, there's no reason for him to have put her there. On top of the fact that you just don't have evidence of a crime happening there. You have evidence of that you have evidence of a crime, but you have no idea where it happened because everything is planted. It looks planned, at least the odds are it's planted because of the way this investigation went. Nobody thought that they should have to do the normal things that investigators have to do. Everybody was just cavalier with this case. Why? That's a problem. So when it comes down to it, it's, I found that video very interesting in terms of, representing the fact that it's really evident that Teresa was killed at the back of that RAV4 with a hammer, most likely, because the size of the blood drops, the spatter on the interior cargo door, the blood's drops or whatever, the spatter that hit was kind of big fat drops. And the only way you get big fat drops like that in your spatter is when you have a big or blunt type of object that the blood is coming off of. If it's a knife and you're using a knife and you're doing this motion or whatever and it's casting off blood, when it's a knife, because the point of the knife is so thin and just it's a point, right? That causes smaller blood droplets or whatever to fly off and therefore can create smaller drops. So they know that it had to be a somewhat bulky blunt object, and that's why Skip Palahniuk wants to get those skull fragments underneath his microtrace microscopes, because he thinks that beveling may not be from a .22 bullet. At least this is my thought. I think this is what Skip Palahniuk is thinking. He sees something in the radio spectrography that is suggesting to him that beveling is not from a bullet, but from a hammer. So that's my thoughts on that. So ultimately, now that brings us to, as I was saying earlier, the Dassey computer evidence. Okay. I'm going to try to go through all the things here that, in a kind of a succession, in an order that they happened kind of thing, to where people can kind of understand the timeline here of what was going on with this computer and the evidence that was therefore on it. So what we have is this computer was seized sometime in March of 2006. It was handed over to a Detective Veely at Grand Chute Police Department over there in Wisconsin, because he was the nearest computer forensic expert guy, and the state obviously has employees that they can send this stuff to. They don't have to go out and find experts and pay them necessarily to do this stuff, because like I said, they got Detective Veely over at Grand Chute, right? A luxury that Dean and Jerry did not have. Okay. So we have them sending this computer over to him. He does his analysis of it, and it takes him 16 days to do his analysis of it. Okay. So when we think about it, 16 days, okay, that's just just a little over 2 weeks, right? On the way, it's 2 days more, right? Okay. So 2 weeks and 2 days, right? So that's a fair amount of time. But he's an experienced computer expert. He knows how to do this stuff. He's used to sifting through computer information and stuff, and using the programs like Encase and the other programs that were on the CD that are actually tools to help with analyzing a computer. Yeah, there's tools there to help you. That's how you get the idea of how involved of a process this is to go through a computer, right? Because, you just think about it. Somebody sets a computer in front of you. You know nothing about it. Right? Especially if you're a defense lawyer. Somebody says, here's this content of this computer. You're like, okay, to know if there's anything there, to know or have any idea if there's anything there that you need or that can help you, you have to just start going through it and clicking on things, and click through each picture or file or whatever, and you got to go into the histories and find the internet search histories to be able to pull that stuff up. And it's not a short process in any way that I can imagine. And the thing is that if it was 16 days for a computer expert like Detective Veely, who had a CD that sat with Tom Fassbender for 12 years, but he had a CD that actually had programs on it and tools on it to help him analyze computers. I doubt Dean and Jerry knew how to use that. Even if it had been given to them, they probably don't know how to use that even. So here's what I'm getting at. You see that it was 16 days for Veely to do it. And Veely has special programs and special tools to help him do it. And those special programs and tools weren't even handed over to the defense because that entire CD was not handed over. And what Detective Veely put on that CD was he pulled out all of the stuff that he had found in the process of going through that computer, all of the things that were like red flags, mutilation of women, raping of women, that sort of all that type of stuff that was in there, images and stuff. He put that all into a file on that CD. Okay. The difference between the CD and the DVDs that were handed over later, well, look, let me put it this way. The CD, you can just pop it into your computer and it's PDF format. Any Windows computer can look at it. All you have to do is have Windows pretty much loaded, because almost any Windows that you have comes with a PDF reader. And that was basically all you would need to be able to see what was on the CD. Whereas with the 7 DVDs, you had to have a special program on your computer called Encase to be able to view those CDs. Be able to view those DVDs and see what was on them. Okay. So, as I said, Detective Veely was given this stuff in like March or whatever. He's done by like April 20th. He has completed the forensic examination of the Dassey computer. That means, and then he gives Tom Fassbender a written like a notes that he had made, like written notes he had made while he was doing this forensic analysis, and a CD and 7 DVDs. Okay. Tom Fassbender keeps the CD. The 7 DVDs stay with the prosecution. And the notes, I have no idea. I've not seen any. I don't know where they are now. I haven't seen anything that said what happened to him. Okay. So that's in April that the prosecution has completed their forensic analysis of the Dassey computer. Their forensic expert has made them aware that there is some pretty illegal stuff on that computer. Highly illegal stuff on that computer. Okay? And the prosecution sits on it. They sit on it through May, June, July, August, September, October, November. And then in the middle, December 9th, okay? 8 months after they've had this evidence. Remember that Detective Ely gave them a CD that showed them that there was a great deal of disturbing imagery and things that were on that computer, and they didn't do anything about that in that 8 months. Then on December 9th, Ken Kratz sends over a mountain of like discovery. It's essentially a bunch of reports from DCI and whatever, and in this mountain is a report from Tom Fassbender that mentions and talks about the CD. Okay? But this report, number one, misrepresents what was found on the computer, whitewashes it. Okay? This report also refers to the computer as Brendan Dassey's computer when it is clearly the Dassey computer, and it is clearly not Brendan who used it very much. There's just a lot of reasons why the report was cloaked to make sure it didn't draw attention, to make sure that it seemed harmless. The Brendan Dassey's computer, blah 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 blah, whatever. So, and it's buried in a mountain so that it hopefully doesn't. So that they're trying to hide it. That's what the prosecution is trying to do here, right? They're trying to hide it, and it's clear that that's what they're trying to do. Then on the 14th, Ken Kratz sends over the 7 DVDs to Dean Strang, okay, and says that is the content of Brendan Dassey's computer. Okay, the CD is not sent. The thing that they would have been able to pop into a computer and go, oh boy, yeah, there's something here and we need to get a forensic expert in here to go over this computer or these DVDs, right? That was held back. That was not turned over. They waited 8 months and then turned over this computer, these DVDs, 3 weeks before Denny was due. Literally. Now, how long did I say it took Detective Ely, a very experienced forensic analyst, computer analyst? 16 days. That's 2 weeks and 2 days. You think Jerry and Dean, who also are lawyers and have their own job to do, and had a lot of things already that they had to deal with, and all kinds of court proceedings that they were going through every day, and it was, they were busy doing things, and they're given 3 weeks when the prosecution had 8 months. See, this is, there's people that are coming on some of these videos that I talk about this, and they're like, oh yeah, well, the prosecution, gave them those DVDs, so they should have hired an expert. Okay, well, let me think about that for a second. Stephen didn't get like millions of dollars. He didn't. Clearly it wasn't the $240,000 or whatever it was that he got. Clearly wasn't really enough, because Dean and Jerry both complained that they were kind of working for a lot less money per hour than they normally would. Okay, so that tells you that a lot of that money got spent on certain things and whatever, and then after Dean and Jerry, making sure that they get paid for what they're doing, there just wasn't a whole lot of money left. And that's the way it is for most people in the world. But Stephen was able to get somewhat of a defense, but seriously, think about it, folks. Avery, the Halbach investigation, was like the biggest investigation in Wisconsin history. Okay? It's like the hugest one. They put so much money into it, so much effort, they spent so much money convicting Stephen Avery. The sky was the limit. Okay? Not the same for Dean and Jerry and Steve. The sky was not the limit. They were very much on a limited resources. So to suggest that they were just going to immediately go, oh yeah, we got all kinds of money, let's get a computer expert in here to examine Brendan Dassey's computer, and they have no idea that there's anything even there. That's the problem with this. And I've said this many times, if the prosecution had handed it over, say, given Dean and Jerry at least, say, 3 months, so if they had handed over, say, like in September or something like that, and Jerry and Dean would have had that much time, that they might have actually been able to look into it. They would have had maybe some time to look into it a little bit and actually possibly discover that maybe there was something there they needed to see. But it wasn't done that way. It was done in a specific way to jam them up when like 3 weeks before Denny's due, so that they wouldn't discover the evidence on that computer and realize that they could make Bobby Dassey a third-party suspect, and that would then effectively take him away as a prosecution witness. At least, in the very least, they could have, I mean, even if they did use Bobby after that, Dean and Jerry are going to talk about how, or they're going to start asking him questions, and the jury's going to find out that he's a third-party suspect. So, most likely, if he would have been made a third-party suspect, he wouldn't have been testifying for the prosecution. Would have made a big difference, I think, in the jury's mind. Because there's no longer anybody that's placing Teresa there, and propping up the prosecution's narrative and timeline, right? So that's my thoughts on this. Look, yeah, Stephen had $240,000 that he basically settled his $36 million lawsuit for that, just so that he could try to raise some kind of a defense against the state that was bringing its guns to bear on him. And when the state brings its guns to bear on you, well, like Stephen says, poor people lose. Poor people lose all the time. So, I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe. We'll see you.